everyone, we are back with our top 10 list. This time around, top 10 things that the writers did right in IPKKND. And honestly, this was very difficult for us to narrow down to just 10 because there is a huge reason why we have an entire podcast dedicated to them. So, Rids, why don't you start off with what's your favorite scene?
I'm cheating a little bit here because, like as said, there's many scenes. The writing in the guest house to resignation sequence. I think they have some really beautiful dialogues there. Khushi's character really comes into herself in these two scenes, and the writing is flawless. There's not an extra word that shouldn't be there, and it's a good end of an arc. I think Khushi's character was really fulfilled in these, and it's also a good example of where you can do a lot by doing very little. From Arnav's character's perspective, like the fact that he didn't have dialogues works really well in these scenes because it's Khushi's time to speak. So I won't say too much about it, but I just think that was really beautifully done and written. And Khushi's arguments in the resignation, especially, flawless. Like there's a reason Arnav doesn't speak, and he shouldn't speak there, and it's just done really well.
Absolutely. To add to that, I think to reiterate Rit's point, it's not just Khushi. I feel Arnav also comes into his own being because I think the beauty from the guest house to the resignation sequence is that we see the aspects of Arnav and Khushi we have not seen before. So we see Khushi's justified anger. She grows beyond a manic pixie dream girl, and we see Arnav's guilt and silence to a man who's supposed to be very arrogant and believes he is to be right. And I think this is what grounds both the characters and makes us fall in love with both of them. And I think one thing I always love about Khushi's argument in the resignation scene is that it's not just rage. She's very logical and intelligent. Two aspects I wish they continued while writing Khushi.
What's yours?
Mine is Arnav and Khushi's conversations that they have post Arnav getting to know that Arav is his own child. I think the whole track was trash, but the way they dealt with these conversations was so brilliant because uh, the dialogues were very mature. Arnav goes to Khushi and asks her, "What should we do about this?" And Khushi's like, "It's okay. Let us take, let us think about this. I am with you." And the next morning, Khushi tells Arnav that it's okay if Arav is his child because whatever happened during college, and whatever happened in the past really does not reflect on their relationship in the present. What matters most is their honesty with each other, and she's not judging his character by what has happened. And Arnav's infinite trust, and I think this was the matured Arnav and Khushi I wanted to see post marriage.
I think that is the track that they should have taken consistently throughout. Like you can have a moment of doubt on Khushi's side, but the realization that it doesn't matter because whatever had happened, it's not like she was unaware of his past. So whatever happened in the past doesn't matter. I think they took way too long getting there. They should have, that should have been the realization she had before all the shit happened. But that sequence is well written. The third one is Diwali is my favorite scene, one of my favorite scenes, but a lot of that has to do with a lot of other things like acting, lighting, cinematography, music, etc., etc. But the transition from Diwali and Khushi's heartbreak to them being okay with each other again I think is handled very beautifully and delicately because they did it without making small of the fact that Khushi's heart really did break. And that in order for them to go back to whatever their bickering relationship is, they had to transition it with the silent, I don't know, they stop speaking to each other, and then the whole kind of comedic thing happens, and and then they have an emotional conversation, and that's sort of with the whole stars thing. That's how they transition out of the heartbreak and into something else. I think that's one of the things the writers did consistently well pre-wedding is they had scenes of huge emotion, heartbreak, some transition into comedy, and then they ended on an emotional note. That's a cycle that they took us on multiple times, and it worked really well for the show.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say is that they had very important conversations based in from Diwali to the end of this whole track. it was really well that while they worked on Khushi's heartbreak, they allowed her to sustain on that grief for as long as they could. And I really like that they used Arnav and showed his different ways on how he's affected by Khushi through jealousy or through confusion, to let us know that there's actually a long way left for these two to come together. So I think those transitions were very well done, especially in terms of dialogue and just character arc. The fourth thing that I really like is the way Arnav discusses his mother's suicide with Khushi. I love it that there's not a big grand dialogue. I love it that he just says it through one line. It is such a painful memory for him that saying that one line that he was 14 when his mother committed suicide, it just breaks everyone's heart because that's the only thing he says. I really love the way they treated Arnav's trauma in this period. Like Kushi tries to make him feel good after he has a nightmare, but clearly her presence does nothing to the fact that he's traumatized. And I love it that when Arnav clearly explains it to her through his lack of interest towards what she's doing to please him, Kushi tells him that I don't want to know about your past and I don't want to interfere. You can let, she gives him space. And then his one dialogue, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's also like a good, because things are somewhat on the right path for the two of them, like in terms of like, you know, most of the misunderstandings being cleared, the whole marriage thing we don't talk about, but like the fact that they're good with each other in these scenes doesn't change anything with Arnav's trauma. Those are two separate events. Like Kushi being in his life doesn't change things when it comes to his PTSD. I think that's also the fact that they did decide to bring it back and highlight that is really good. The next one, I think, given what she just talked about, I would say the conversation that Anjali and Arnav have regarding their mom's bangle. The letter is beautiful. The whole sequence of events, like just the way they wrote it, especially given the fact that it was early on in the show, it shows you the amount of turmoil that these two have been through. You see the difference in how each of them handles it, and that there's, you know, just because Anjali is smiling all the time doesn't mean she doesn't have grief, and just because Arnav is cold all the time doesn't mean he doesn't have emotions that he's burying very, very deep. Like it's a good scene to highlight the opposite of what their characters generally are. It was beautifully written, beautifully acted, but beautifully written.
Yeah, I think one thing we can understand that Arnav's lack of dialogues, or the fact that he often ends big conversations with just one small dialogue, reveals a lot about what he's feeling about. Because Anjali goes through this long thing of how their mom would caress them, put them to sleep, and everything, and how Anjali. I think my favorite line is when Anjali's like, "If mom could see you today," and Arnav ends it with, "Then she wouldn't be able to recognize me." So painful and also a beautiful way of showing that Arnav is completely aware of who he is as a human being. My next point is when Kushi asks Arnav to say sorry and he's unable to do so. One thing that I completely hate in general is people treating the other person's sorry like a prize, because in my eyes, forgiveness is a big thing. And probably why I hate Ek Jashan is that Kushi makes a huge deal of Arnav saying sorry for something the both should be celebrating. But over here, she's not asking for a trivial sorry. It's where Arnav has touched one of the most important parts of her memory and he has misbehaved with her. And I really like it that Kushi tells him that, okay, his only excuse for his misbehavior was that he did not know anything about her. And now that he does, he should be able to say sorry. It was, again, a very mature look on what forgiveness looks like. So I really liked it.
Again, I think it's another scene that shows the characters in a light that we didn't see them in before. Kushi is also the happy-go-lucky, you know, life punches you and you get back up again kind. And to show her in the light of like, you know, it's not because she had a super happy life, it's that she chooses to be that way. And there is also a hidden hurt in her. It's one of the things that highlights that as different as these two are, they're also very similar. The next thing, again, is kind of a transition, kind of like two scenes. I'm cheating all the way here. I completely know this, but the New Year conversation transitioning into the Sangeet, like Arnav and Kushi have some solid dialogues in both of these. It's flirting, but a very intelligent flirting. It's very clear that they both know what they're feeling at this point, but they're reluctant to let the other see it. So it's always about what do the other lack that they have. The whole conversation about like, you need I have something you don't. And she's like, what? And he's like, a brain. And then she repeats it back to him during the Sangeet, where she's like, I have something but having which I can never turn into you. A heart. Just really, really well written. And I written in like they split the conversation up, but it hits you well because of that reason. And I enjoy it greatly.
I think there was some really good writing done there, and it's a lot to stuff within a few episodes. Like, within in our eyes, within a few days. And I think I just really like how they show Arnav and Khushi's affections and emotions changing for each other every single day. Like they up their game against each other. Like if they go from subtle, then by the end of it they're just blatant flirting with each other. I just love the point where NK is like, okay, you guys just keep on staring into each other's eyes, I'll leave for my performance. So they balance comedy without making any of the character look shallow. Continuing to that, coming to my next point is the whole pre-Akash Payal wedding moment. I loved the way Arnab blatantly flirts with Khushi. I love how Khushi's like, I'm feeling all the butterflies and I will not react to this flirting, but I will flirt back. I will flirt back. That is one thing she will do. I really loved the way their conversations become a bit more intense the more they talk to each other. And by Akash and Payal's day of wedding, when she's in her orange outfit, I really love the conversations that take place because at this point, Arnav and Kushi love each other so much that they don't even want to pull the others like a lot. So when Arnav is teasing Kushi that what was she distracted with, that she ended up feeding the leaves to the cow, she becomes all hassled, and then he immediately moves on to the next thing. And when because she's like, not everyone eats stuff with metal spoons and fork, and then she's like, well, you know what I mean. She tries to explain what patte means, and I think that's a huge character growth for both of them.
Yeah, you see the start of something which I'll mention in honorable mentions later on because we only have 10 things. But it's even the har baat pe rona zaruri hota hai thing, like also like you can see that this is a softer, like they're never going to be the couple who's like sweet and soft and all of that, but their bickering will be more fun and less um, intended to like hurt or point out flaws or anything like that. So it's a good build up. The one that I have as my last thing is Lavanya's exit. I think that was one sequence that was, at least, I mean, she can probably speak to this much better, but I think the handling of Lavanya's character, the grace with which she was written out of the show, and how she exits is done very, very beautifully and is a really, really graceful and beautiful way of handling the other love interest in the situation. They did that kind of with NK as well, but Lavanya's exit to me is one of the things that sets the show apart. Like it's not something that I've seen before or happening after IPK.
I think one thing I really liked about it was that it was very realistic. It's not that Lavanya and Kushi, like, after 2 months, team up together and be like, oh, Arnav is so terrible, girl gang rocks. No, like, Lavanya has her bit of hurt. She has a bit of understanding. And I really like the way she talks to Kushi by the end. You understand she has matured so much as a character just because of the dialogues was really excellent. And the fact that Lavanya leaves by giving Arnav some meaning advice that is necessary in future, that is something he does not heed to. I think it was just a beautiful tie-up to who Lavanya was also as a person.
Is it time for honorable mentions?
No, because here
Oh.
comes my last point is I
Shouldn't we
love
do
the
it
way,
before the last point?
yeah,
Yeah.
time for honorable mentions, guys.
I'll go first. Here, Ranja, great dialogues. Very, it fits very well with where they are in their relationship at that point. That's the only way they could have said sweet things to each other, if it was as not themselves. Khushi and Arnav, this kind of ties back into the point that S was making about pre-Payal Akash wedding sequence thing. Khushi and Arnav's understanding of each other during their second wedding, the conversation Khushi has with Buaji about, he doesn't really believe in all these things, so we shouldn't force him. And the fact that Arnav chooses to learn about the wedding and how things are done and what the rituals mean because it's important to Khushi, it just really shows the growth in their characters and relationship. Very well done.
Some of honorable mentions from my end. I love the way Payal refuses Akash's wedding proposal when Arnav and Khushi are present. She tells Akash that, "What do you know about me that you love me?" And I really love it that a few scenes later, she yells at Arnav that, "If you know where your brother was going to commit suicide from, would you come and give me a letter, or would you go and save him?" I think I loved Payal's dialogues absolutely in those episodes. I love the scene where where Khushi calls Arnav, and the night after they consummated, and they don't have a mushy conversation, but they have a very realistic conversation where he's like, "Are you all right?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm all right." And he's like, "No, especially after last night." And she replies with, "I don't regret anything," which in my eyes, absolutely gorgeous writing. Going back to their second wedding, I really like the moment where Arnav brings Khushi back home to their house, like to their room when they're ready to apparently consummate, like suhag raat honi chahiye. He's unable to like kiss her, do anything because he's still traumatized from the fact that he had to face his past. And Kushi decides to sit and talk his feelings out. And I think that is great. I love watching a couple communicate. I think that is absolutely beautiful. And my last honorable mention is, I almost love every single interaction between Akash and Anjali. They're amazing. But one of my most favorite scenes that's brilliantly well written for comedy is where Akash tries to explain how he has this strange dupatta in his hand, and it's for Kailash matching center, and Anjali is like, "Bana rahe ho hame." Such a good play on puns and everything. It's great comedy.
One other scene that did not make the cut, but I absolutely love, is Sundari Shaitan conversation. Again, great point in the show to make that point. I suppose it's just a really well written sequence to show, again, show Kushi's pain, Arnav's confusion at Kushi's pain. And there's comedy in it too. Like, it's just it has a little bit of everything, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't belong, unlike the Swami track.
Yeah, no, that scene was very good. Again, a great example of show don't tell. They again show what's happening, and you get to see all the undercurrents. And the last scene, in my eyes, which I think was great writing, was when Kushi describes her wedding to Preeto. It was so emotional, and I always love show don't tell. And the fact that Kushi describes her dream wedding and that it is nowhere close to how she actually got married breaks my heart so beautifully than any scene where Kushi could have told Arnav, when Kushi yells at Arnav कि तुम्हें पता नहीं है सिंदूर और मंगलसूत्र का क्या मायने होता है, that does not really break my heart as much as Kushi being like, "Oh, I had the marriage of my dreams. I wore my favorite clothes, and it was," and it's also tied back well. It's tied back well to Kushi actually having a green in her wedding trousseau, Arnav actually gifting her a million bangles right before her wedding. So in my eyes, that was really good pain.
Yeah, it's also a good moment of Arnav realizing all the impacts of what he had done. I think you needed that scene there to, again, this is one of those, like, in out of context, this is a very well written scene as a standalone. I think his moments of realization at what Kushi is saying is also very, very well. It also ties into the whole conversation Kushi has right after with Garima about how Arnav is a great husband. Those two scenes together, I think, just set up the heartbreak really, really well, because you don't need her to have a conversation with Arnav. Her pretending that everything is fine and everything was great breaks his heart enough.
Yeah, and like, I know I keep this short, but like, one thing I really liked about these moments is that this is only focused on Kushi's pain. And it has almost nothing to do with Arnav. It's about her dreams being broken by him. And that is an aspect of Khushi we were not allowed to see for the longest time after the marriage. So, with that, we finally come to an end to our top 10 list. Please let us know about any of the scenes that we obviously might have missed. Stay tuned. Don't forget to like, share, or subscribe. And subscribe. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.